Cool. Well, I think we're live. Good morning, everybody. I'm
Morning.
James Wisdom. You're watching Drawing for Tattooers on Reinventing the Tattoo Network. With me this morning, got Kyle Olson. Hey, Kyle, how you
Hello.
doing?
Doing great. How about
Uh,
you, James? You having a good
I'm,
morning?
yeah, doing great. I am. I'm getting warmed up. We got a couple of circles here. Well, anyway, so what I'm thinking about is like, um, you know, drawing in perspective, just getting warmed up. So I'm thinking about you know, I don't know, slicing a segment, right? Maybe like an orange or something like that.
Hmm.
Um, if I want to put the center of this, you know, cut in half sphere here, I got to
Hmm.
put it back just a little bit further than the visual center. That would give us a perspective, right?
Hmm.
But yeah. So something like that. And maybe just sort of practicing making different segmentations, just like a little bit off the top, right? Something like that. Giving some giving some form, right? The contour.
Morning, creature.
What do we got? Creature? Oh, in the
Yes.
chat. Hey, morning, creature. If this is working for you, please let us know. Evidently, creature can see us on YouTube. Uh, I've pretty much been just streaming on Reinventing the Tattoos YouTube. Used to stream to a lot of different places, but don't have that hooked up right this moment, and so that was pretty bad. Okay, um, but that's all right. I really do like to emphasize just getting warmed up. Start, I'm gonna try. I'm just go like really light. Again, just sort of sketching it in, right? Just sketch in just a little bit lightly the ellipse, and then I will add just a little bit more emphasis once I have some of the shape really kind of nailed down. Right. Just sketching, right? Just trying to get loosened up and think about, how all these forms, how they might look. I mean, so I think you can do all sorts of, different forms for kind of a warm up. One that I like to do also is, maybe like a cone. You can think about how might this look. You can imagine it. Maybe even draw a much sort of wider cone shape. I think it can be useful for like putting things together and um, making making something new, right? Making a more complicated form out of all these pieces. Well, I've got quite a mess of got quite a mess of little shapes on here. But again, just warming up, just warming up. Kyle, how was your week? Been
Um,
busy?
it's been it's been going, man. It was busy last week. Trying to do all the things and
Nice.
trying to finish this print that is never going to be finished because there's I have still so much to do on it, and yeah, it hasn't been too shabby of a week. I'm excited for this week. Um, Should be pretty fun. I finished another rose and I'm waiting to get that healed so I can check that out and see how everything laid and healed and whatnot.
Excellent.
Um, so yeah, it was a pretty good week last week. What about you?
Yeah, been busy, been getting ready for some summertime travels. So, really exciting. I'm headed to New Mexico, Albuquerque. Is,
Nice.
the convention that's out there. The Alliance of Professional Tattooists is. We're going to meet in person. That's not too far from you, Albuquerque. You should come out to the convention.
Yeah, when is that?
It is July 12th through the 14th.
July 12th through
You're
the
also in the Alliance of Professional Tattooists, I believe.
I am.
Yes. You should definitely
I
try to
should
make
actually
it
like
out.
attend a meeting, you know.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
it'd be great.
definitely.
Great to have you. Like, come to any meetings that you want. Um, but we're gonna get together. It's gonna be fun. There's gonna be
Oh yeah, it's only like six and a
about
half hours.
6.5 hours.
Yeah, ain't bad.
You can do that.
Oh yeah, easily.
Do that 6.5 hours. You'll be there.
Yeah.
Um, no. So, oh yeah, and also I'm I have an appointment for a tattoo. Really excited about it. It is with Guy Atchison. I'm gonna get a tattoo. So
Dude, that's exciting.
I am stoked. Yeah, no, I'm stoked. So,
Congrats.
but yeah, thank you. Well, it's been something I've been thinking about for a long time, and I finally like reached out, and yeah, I'm gonna get it done. So I am
Dope.
looking forward to that. What do we got here? Oh my god, congratulations! Yeah, thank you, creature. Well, I will show it off as soon as I probably show you the stages. You know what I mean? Because it's gonna take a while, but
Mhm.
he works pretty fast. I'm feeling like pretty warmed up. I think we've got enough shapes. Did some spheres, right? There's ellipses in there, some cylinders and stuff too. So I like that. Right. Ah, jumping ahead. Right. So like to think about how do we stretch out our wrists. Here's all the muscles of your forearm right there. Very important to, allow you to have all the dexterity in your fingertips. So to stretch these out, right, let's just oh, do the flexion, right? We're stretching, right? The muscles that flex. So hold that just for a few minutes. Use both hands, go to do it with both hands, right? Just stretch that out. And flex the extension, right? All the extender muscles. What are some of these muscles, right? Well, the extenders, extensor carpi radialis brevis, right? There's that one. Extensor carpi radialis longus. A little tiny one, it's a little bit deeper. Common extensor tendon, look right across the top there. Brachoradialis.
These Starbucks drink names are getting out of control.
I
Man.
know, right? It is there's all these amazing little muscles that comprise your forearm. So I think it's good to study up on it a little bit, kind of get a sense of them. It might be maddening to try to memorize all of them, but you know, having a few and sort of knowing the way that they flow can help you with your tattoo compositions. In Reinventing the Tattoo, there's certainly several sections in the fit and flow portions. They talk about like some of the anatomy for tattooers. So again, it can be really useful. All right. Hey, Kyle. Good morning.
Morning.
Today, wanted to talk about color theory. Uh, I think that it's such an interesting topic. It's one of those things that you kind of use every day. To be honest, even if you are really focused on black and gray, for instance, I still think that color is going to be a part of it to some degree. Right? Your uh, tonal value, how light, how dark. This is what makes up the structure, the bones. But what sits on top of it is going to be all of this luscious color. Not everybody sees color exactly the same way, right? It's certainly there's certainly degrees of perception. There are animals that like see, much more of the visible spectrum of light than humans do. So uh, we really need to get a handle on tonal value first, but color can be such a powerful tool to help you express things, build contrast in different ways. Hey, Jason, good morning.
Morning, Jason.
So, color theory certainly it can be a it can be pretty intuitive, I think, but also it can be really a complicated uh, discussion. Because again, I think like you can learn about it like fairly quickly, but the conversation goes on. People are still talking about how we approach color theory. How do we approach like the use of color practically, so that way you can get the most out of it. So, and I know that you've talked about you play you play a fun game, Blendoku, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Blendoku is a color matching game, and it's almost like a training. And it kind of helps you train your perception, so you're a little bit more in tune with what it is you're seeing, what it is you're looking at. So I've been playing it too. I think it's a fun one, but there's nothing like digging in and really mixing up colors. So whether you're mixing up paint, whether you're sort of optically blending with like color pencils or whatever, or you are tattooing, I think there's going to be some factors that we're all going to want to keep in mind whenever we're sort of approaching color. So let me see if I can go back to it. All right, I've made lots of layers, start to talk about stuff, but we'll just start with just some of these basic ones. So red, yellow, blue. These are what is known as the primary colors. We often, I think we're taught this, especially like, when you were young in school, this sort of a thing. You probably saw these really intense colors a lot. The theory, sort of classic color theory, is that you make all of the colors from these three. That is that's definitely the what we're taught. However, practically, if you mix just red and blue together, it doesn't always make the most intense violet, right? Purple. Same thing, red and yellow. You might get an orange. It's not very, doesn't feel very intense or true. Yeah, any of these mixtures, it doesn't feel like you're always getting the most intense color, right? Secondary one. Okay, so what printers have discovered, right? And we see prints all the time, right? Whenever you see something that has been a printed material, the way that that's produced is through CMYK. I kind of just put these next to, they're close, right? This is like, sort of a shifting of the color wheel, as it were. CMYK is, get rid of this RGB for a second. Cyan, add an extra window, right? So the cyan, right? That's that blue color, magenta, this pinkish violet color, and yellow, right? Cyan, yellow, magenta, CMYK, right? These colors are what your printer inks in your computer are made out, or your printer rather. So you print something out, you're going to get some mixture of these. A lot of times the colors that come out of these mixtures, they seem really accurate. I think you can get very accurate. The screen that we're looking at right now, if you're watching this on a screen, yes, and black. Exactly, Jason. Thank you. Jason Leeser just in the chat said cyan, yellow, magenta, black, right? CMYK, key, which is black. Yes. And that has to do with, again, we were talking about this idea of like the tonal value is the structure that underlies all of the color. And that's where the black ink would come into play. That's likely why we really think about black ink as being really important for our, for our tattooing, because it gives us tonal value. So there we go. Now, if you're looking at this on a screen, right, what you're seeing in this instance, right, is red, blue, green, RGB, right? The red, blue, and green. Those are the colors that are getting mixed, and that's producing the yellow that you're seeing right here on your screen, right? Somehow, color theory, it's very interesting. It can be almost sort of mysterious in a way. And there are scientific approximations for these wavelengths of light. The Munsell color spectrum, or color additive theory, is one of these. James Gurney is really good on this. He talks about the Munsell color wheel in his book Light. What is it? Yeah, it's I forget the name. Maybe we'll put it up here, a link to that book. James Gurney's book on light and color for the artist, or for the painter rather, is is a really incredible section on some of these scientific approximations. But again, it's when you get to practical use, it's like, how are you really going to get the most intense color? And so a lot of times we may end up adding to these more primary ones. All right, so we mix some colors together. Let's add some secondaries, right? Get rid of that for just a second for clarity's sake, right? The secondary colors are the ones that are in between, right? Red to yellow, we have orange that comes up, yellow to blue, there's a green that comes up, and then the blue to red. This is the basic theory. Again, when you are dealing with something in practical real life terms, you may find that it doesn't work so simply. But what you might find is that, like, adding this idea of the CMYK to your traditional sort of primary palette, you might get a little bit closer to some of the intense colors. Again, the way I understand color theory is hue, intensity, value. Those are the three principles of color theory: hue, intensity, value. What is hue? It's the color, right? What is intensity? It's how pure the color appears. And then the value is how light and how dark. So add another. All right, there we go. Now we're starting to see like a full wheel of colors. We're starting to see all the colors that we might expect. And if we look at the color wheel that we have here, let me see, I can disk, right? You can see it over here. Mine's almost oriented the same way, but you're starting to get the idea, right? There's a spectrum, right? And it's sort of closed in on itself. And this is why, this is the basic sort of theory about this color wheel. So I'll blend it together a little bit. Nice. All right, so we're talking about all of these colors together. It really kind of looks like, instead of being all these really, closed segmentations, there's actually kind of an infinite array, right, of colors that there's an infinite amount of steps you could take between these two, right? Between, say, orange to this red. Like, you could start and stop anywhere you like. But again, this circle is a true infinity because it does sort of presuppose its beginning. And again, there's also this sort of notion like it's not really going to start and stop. It's kind of always in motion. Okay, now here's this is the next thing I would like to say, right, that we're talking about like this intensity value. If we add the complement or colors that are, for instance, sort of across from each other on the wheel, right, we lose intensity, right? We start to get something that's a little bit more neutral, right? So if we were to add, black, or if we were to add, the complement, then we start to neutralize the colors. Get rid of this, right? Okay. If we add white, same kind of situation, right? It's the same. There's the same relationship insofar as um, we end up having a loss of intensity, but also, we're going to change the value. Pull up these neutrals. Here's my representation of like these neutrals, right? Um, as you can kind of see, I have like a yellow and a violet. Mixed it together, it kind of kills the intensity. It certainly makes a color that's like, it's closer to gray, right? It has kind of what we would call gray or brown, maybe, but it's an approximation. Same thing with these other complementary pairs. And so we're getting closer and closer to some indistinguishable color, sort of like the background that I have going on. The background behind the colors that you see is neutral gray. It's like impossible to tell like what color it is. So again, if we are pushing it lighter or darker, right, we're talking about value, right? Have some values over here on the sides. A gradient. I like this gradient. Again, it's kind of an infinite amount of steps that you could take. But it's, again, we, as artists, we're going to have to like be decisive and make a certain, make a choice, as it were, about like, what is the lightest, what is the darkest. Right. Let me turn off a few of these. And we'll talk about briefly how do we harmonize these colors, right? We've talked about like the hue, the intensity, the value, right? Now it's like, how do we harmonize some of these colors? Again, we talked about complements, so something that's like directly across. This is called triadic, right? Split complementary color palette. So we have a key color that would be this yellow, and then directly across from it would be the violet. You split that, right? So red violet and blue violet. Those three colors together are going to give you what's known as split complementary color harmony. Use them in various ways. Again, across that idea of hue, intensity, value. You can move this around wherever you'd like, and ultimately it's going to give you a harmony of colors that will emphasize the key, right? So this key color, right, it stands out. It's the most contrast versus these two others that are much closer to what we call analogous. An analogous color harmony, get rid of that, right, would be colors that are right next to each other. So if you, again, we kind of see this, we call it magenta, right? We could call it red violet, violet, blue violet, right? Those colors are analogous. They're right next to each other. That might be a direction you'd like to go if you want to blend, right? If you want to get from, let's say, this blue violet all the way up to red, right? You may want to use this analogous pathway, right, to get there, instead of just adding like white or black to it, right? You may end up sort of using colors to adjust the tonal value, to adjust how light, how dark. And this gives you like a more intense kind of presentation of color. Again, you have to, it's a lot to keep in mind. So thinking about the value structure is going to help guide you in this very, like this sea of colors. Like how do you navigate it? Think value first. After that, colors don't really matter, or relative. They're relative. So if the value is correct, you could potentially use almost any color you like. I like to think about pointillism in this, right? Kind of an optical blending. However, uh, if you end up using, you know, complements and you make kind of a gray, muddy color, and that's not what you intend, that again could like sort of distract. Um, I think the other thing that I would just mention, caveat to that, is that like using really neutralized colors in order to sort of make your, you know, atmospheric perspective or whatever the case may be, there's a lot of power in those gray tones, right? So if you, just like we're kind of looking at this, all this, we'll call it, color's really sweet, right? There's all, it's really intense. If everything's intense, right, you don't have the intensity. Like that's why this gray background and this color wheel, they really, they really pop. They accentuate each other because there's contrast. There's one against the other, and so um, I think if your piece is, whatever it is, if it's all bright, bright, it's, there's something about it that like it's less dynamic. That's just that's what I've observed, and certainly a lot of artists would agree as well. So, all right. So when everything is so complicated, how do we just determine this? Kind of working in this gray on gray color temperature, right? So I kind of have this representation of warm neutral, right, to a cool neutral. And so when you're dealing with these very, very neutral gray tones, you know, pick one, right, or you pick another, right? I picked those colors from very gray spots, but right next to each other, right, they provided, a lot of contrast. And so, again, like you need to discern the value, right? How light, how dark, but then you add this extra layer of warm and cool in terms of the gray, and you have a much more sophisticated, a much more interesting potential composition on your hands. Um, you may pop in just a little tiny bit of intense color in there, and it looks so much more intense, right? Then it's being surrounded by all bright colors, all intense colors. Instead, you've you've added contrast, right? Contrast is all about difference, and so having some things that are similar can make the contrasting element look even more accentuated, right? It can add emphasis in really dynamic ways. Okay, last thing, and then I will we'll bring it into discussion. Right, is this idea of simultaneous contrast, again, like we've been trying to talk about, that value, intensity, right, and the hue, right, the color. In this case, everything is very neutralized, a neutral dark, a neutral light. I've kind of revealed the background here, but what I think that what we can see, we can notice, right, is that this gray in the middle, it looks darker in relationship to the light stuff, and then it looks lighter in relationship to the darker half. And I think that's pretty simple, but what it does is it helps us extend the range, right? It helps us extend the potentials of our very limited palette. You may have a full palette, right? But there's still a limit, right? Again, these unlimited steps you could take, but there is a limit. So thinking about simultaneous contrast is really the next, like it's a super important concept to get down. Um, let me see. I'll add another one. Here's another simultaneous contrast. Uh, in this case, right, kind of put like this really intense color. Try to match the the value, right? I think the value might be it's close, but it might be slightly different than you know uh, than the example to the left. But again, the concept is the same, that this red is going to look darker on a light background, or like next to really light things, and then again it's going to look lighter in a dark background. Finally, this last one, all intense colors. Again, I'm just trying to show like a neutral sort of thing, and then like these intense colors. I suppose we could even we could like erase this out and show what the simultaneous of the gray, right, kind of does. But again, I think that there's doing these little color experiments just to kind of see, how do you extend the range, how do you know how can you use like a simultaneous contrast, uh, like hopefully it'll get you out of a jam. So again, a lot of these principles that we're talking about, they're conceptual. Rather than trying to give you like an exact rule or recipe to follow, I'm hoping that this can help you as you're working through it, right? Give you some freedom so you can end up making informed decisions, informed choices of your own that you can feel confident about. That's hopefully what you're going to walk away from this discussion. And so I'd certainly love to get if anybody has questions, or of course, intensity is also called chroma. Yeah, that's a great. Here, I'll show that question. That's a great question, creature. Yeah, intensity is also known as chroma. So we would say chroma. For instance, this red that I have here in the middle is a very high chroma. That's what that's another way to say it. Um, the middle gray, this medium gray in the middle, it's would be very low chroma. It just doesn't have it. It's just not as intense. It's more neutral. Uh, so, and then we definitely talked about this too. Like another way to say intensity or chroma is saturation. In tattooing, we say saturation because we're actually referring to like putting a lot of ink into the skin, like a lot of ink into a particular area. It does make sense that it's sort of the same word. I know, Kyle, I remember that you and I talked about this a bit. I'm a lot more to your thinking on this as well. I think that like if you saturate something, you're gonna, you could saturate something with like a neutral gray as well, right? So that
Mm-hmm.
could have like a really neutral color that you've saturated the skin with, or you could saturate with this very high chroma, high intensity color.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I guess there are relationships, and then there are also like there are ways in which we depart. So there's a physical level of saturation of pigment particles in a given area
Mm-hmm.
that may give you a more saturated high chroma, but of course it might give you a much more low chroma neutral, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does
Mm-hmm.
that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, 100%.
I think it does, but it's also for the uninitiated, you go to talk about some of these ideas around color, and um, it can be a bit dizzying, I think. Um, I, I feel comfortable talking about it because I think about it and talk about it all the time. And then, I'm always around other artists. So we're always thinking about color. We're always thinking about, um, a lot of these issues are stuff that we're going to deal with on a regular basis. Um, Again, having a shared language, I think, can be really useful in terms of like getting the communication going,
Mm-hmm.
being able to communicate effectively. So when we say hue, talking about the name of each particular color. When we say intensity or chroma or saturation, right? We're talking about how close it is to look like it's, looking like it's a pure color representation or a neutral one. One where it's tougher, right, to determine. Generally speaking, if we're looking at, you know, if we're looking at this wheel, if we pick a particular color, if we pick a particular color, we isolate it, we might be able to say, oh yeah, that looks like the magenta color we were talking about. Right? We pick another one out, isolate it. Oh yeah, that looks like that cyan color we were talking about. So on and so forth. Um, so intensity versus like neutral. Oh, we've got this middle gray background, right? What color is that middle gray? I don't know. It's we want to say it's like it's pure neutral. It's just a pure neutral. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but uh in relationship, right? I do think that, if I go back to that little this guy, right? Kind of zoom in on it. Again, there is a lot of closeness, right, with the background and these neutral colors. Um, and so that's really what we're talking about. Value, right? With value, it's how light, how dark things are. And oh, look at that. That's fun. How light, how dark things are. This ultimately is the structure that underlies all of your visual language. What lays on top of it is going to be the color. So again, I've definitely heard, like, tattoo artists particularly, talk about sort of doubting that you can take an image and turn it into grayscale and sort of see the total value structure like that. Like that's not an effective way to determine, like, the contrast. And I beg to differ. I think that's like exceedingly important.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I do think it's exceedingly important that you have like a really strong grasp of like how light, how dark things are, the tonal value. And then all of this color stuff that we were just talking about, that can be laid on top of it. It can, you can create a whole new level of interest and nuance, meaning, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you're going to lose a lot of that effective communication we were just talking about, right? If you're not thinking about tonal value being the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, mind your values, if you will. But
Mm-hmm.
that's
Mm-hmm.
that is that is it. That's my presentation on color theory. I hope that was thanks. Thank you, Kyle. Appreciate that. Um, that might have been a lot, but also I do hope that it was helpful. I could see, I could see a criticism there. That was too rudimentary, right? Um, but again, what I'm hopefully helping everybody realize is that you can make all these color choices. No one can guarantee for you, right? If it's right or not. It is relative. The color is going to be relative. I do think that tonal value is the most important part. Get that down, and then the color is going to start to sing, right? It's going to really become something that can be amazing. So, um, oh yeah, let's. We've got a question here in the chat. Jason asked about additive versus subtractive. Yeah, no, it's a great question, Jason. Additive versus subtractive. So, additive is like we were talking about with this red, blue, green, like in your screen, right? So, additive is when rays of light are added together and they make other colors. Subtractive is like with pigment, right? So it's physical. It's not like projected light. It's reflected light. So with subtractive, certain wavelengths are getting canceled out, right, as they mix together. And so this is that difference with additive and subtractive. I know you know that, but but certainly, uh, let's see. We've got another question in the chat. Thanks for all the questions, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
please feel free to ask them. What is better, tinting and shading, ink, or using colors to change the saturation, chroma, intensity? Um, I think it's more interesting, and then Kyle, I'd love to get your take on this too. But like, I think it's more interesting if you can use colors to neutralize other colors.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can't get away from adding, the white and the black. Uh, but if you just take one color and you add white and black to it and get a range, then what you end up with is you end up with a monochromatic. Hey, Jason, you add white and black to just
Hola.
one color, and that's called monochromatic. Again, like we were showing before, that split complement. If you just limit your palette to a few colors, that would be a limited palette. Um, an unlimited palette, all you can eat is is like, I
How many is a few, James?
you get I think you end up with like uh, diminishing returns after like if you have everything all at once,
So if
right?
I have 92 different shades and values of blue, I don't need all of them?
I think that you would want to start thinking about simultaneous contrast, and you want to start thinking about hue, intensity, value to
What
help
if
out
what if
all those
what
blues.
if I
But you
only
take those
buy one
92 blues,
color?
which is okay to have, but then you take three of them. You're like, oh, I'm just going to stick to these and use the most out of those. I think it's great to have lots of colors, but something that Jake Meeks always talks about is if you don't know what colors that you should buy, just get some of the basics like we just sort of covered. Start mixing them together. Whatever you're mixing the most, maybe buy that one. Maybe try that one out, and that way you start to know like what is your palette like. What is the thing that you're sort of drawn to, as it were.
Back when I was in art school,
No,
we
that's
had a professor that was adamant that if we didn't know how to mix a color, we weren't ever allowed to bring it to class,
mm,
like already pre-mixed in the tube. And he would go around and he would spot check us every now and then. And I remember watching someone sit down and they had a tube of oil color that was like this gorgeous royal violet. And the professor came over to them, and this was in like the first couple of weeks of class, and they were like, "Cool, so you can mix that, right?" And they were like, "Well, yeah, it's gonna be this blue and this red." And he's like, "All right, go ahead and start mixing it." And it did not turn out that shade because they were using the wrong base, powder to start with. But
uh,
um,
you can't get to certain colors
you can't.
like by mixing them together. Like there's going to be particular mixtures that you really can't get any other. They're made out of different stuff. And again, I think what you can do is you can actually break your harmony, right? If you add too many like outside, you know, yeah, it's add too many outsiders, as it were.
Right, right.
Um, Instead, right, you're harmonizing between like there's a limitation, there's a limit, and you're harmonizing it within that, and that's how you can end up uh, with something truly beautiful. I again, I think you can find beauty in a lot of different places, I suppose. So I don't want to try to like you know speak about that in particular, like absolutes, but certainly like if you just if you're just grabbing colors off the shelf and you're putting it together, I think that's wonderful for an experiment, right? It's something that Dali talked about. Like you should definitely experiment, right? But like when you're producing like professional work, that needs to be something that you have a much closer sort of relationship to an understanding, as it were. So
I think that also helps to help identify a unique artist's color palette, right? And you'll show consistency across the board with all of the work being produced by that artist, because now you can turn around and identify their individual color palette, which is going to put almost like a signature kind of look to their work. It's going to help it be identifiable as their work.
Certainly. Kyle,
Mm.
I want to get you in on this. What are your here was Creature's question.
What is better, tinting and shading ink, or using color to change the saturation, chroma, intensity level? I guess it really ultimately depends on what you need to get accomplished. So let's say that you need to get a lighter color, and you're like in the sense of like you want to make it brighter. Um, Using white to try to accomplish that won't, because the white is going to desaturate it, which is going to be like counterproductive. Um, and my brain always thought like it's the same with black. If you add black, you're gonna lose, like it's gonna desaturate as well. The little experiment that I just did, I was wrong, so that's cool and that's fine. Um, because the black like just took it down on um, just the value. It didn't lose so much saturation doing it. Adding gray and black took it and desaturated it. So I guess it really ultimately depends on what you need to accomplish. Definitely, dude, it's so hard because it just ultimately depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Um, because like if you're trying to accomplish A, you know, B and C might be the best thing to do. If you're trying to accomplish, B, it, two C's might be the best thing. Like it really ultimately depends on what you're trying to accomplish. I guess it's really hard for me to say like a definite answer of like what's better. Definitely mixing colors more than just you relying on black and white will help your overall color vocabulary. Because once you start looking at colors and stuff like that, to where um, it's not so much, oh, this needs more black or this needs more white. It starts becoming, oh, this is a little bit more green than this one, or this one needs a little bit more red. And the changing of the colors. Like if I add like a little bit more red um, to like green, yeah, it's going to muddle it, but like red's also a bit darker if sometimes, and depending on the green you use, or vice versa. Like there's a lot of variables. So I would suggest messing around with as much color as you can before you start using any blacks and whites, just to help with everything.
And
So,
no, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
oh, I was like, does that answer? I don't know if that
No,
answers.
I think that's a great. I think that was a great way to to sort of tackle it. Um, and so when you are like deciding how to like accomplish something, um, uh, what do you have a particular? mm, do you notice that you're using a particular sort of approach or a method? Like, has there been something that has really helped you, start to get a handle? You know what I mean? Help you really get a handle on some of these things, some of these concepts.
Um, on just like the color side of things, or
Sure.
um, just really studying the colors and just like really comparing the colors as best as you can on what is what, like the under, like I don't know, just like how much, if one's more yellow than the other one, or what's the value differences and stuff like that. Just really studying what color it is, and then also taking like a picture of said topic or whatever, or a tattoo that I'm working on currently, and changing it over to grayscale to make sure that my values are on point. Um, are just a couple things that I do. Um, just really making sure um, that the value is on point, because like the color is just kind of like secondary, I guess, when it comes to like just making sure that your values are on point. Um, I don't know. I don't know if I have an answer to that question. I don't know.
Well, let me, if I may, I'll share. Let me share this. This is something that, like, I learned. My painting teacher taught me, and I found it really useful. Let me see if I can share. Okay. All right. So what I have here again is it's sort of like those primary colors we were talking about before,
Hmm.
but instead, if you're thinking about oil paint, and I think this extends. I've never really done a tattoo like this, but I think it might actually be pretty. It might be a really interesting, look. So something to consider. I believe this is called the Zorn palette. So, but forgive me, like I only went to school to painting school for a decade. I'm dumb. Anyway, whatever. So, all right. So we've got these colors here: the yellow ochre, the red, alizarin crimson. You don't have to remember these, but I'm just it's a neutral, somewhat neutral yellow. The red isn't like the most intense, but it's pretty bright. And then black. Usually we would use something called ivory black. But again, it's fairly neutral. It might be just slightly on the warmer side of black. Again, we were talking about that idea of like warm and cool, and how those how that can really influence the perception of your grays or any of the neutrals. Like if we think about like when we say white, when we say black, what we're saying is that they're actually approximations. There's some color or there's some neutral color, but again, it's like the lightest possible thing and then the darkest possible tone value. So anyway, right, so if we think about it like in terms of the color theory that we've been talking about, right, we go yellow and the black, and then you mix them together, right, and you come up with something that's kind of like a green, right? It's like black serves this role of blue. So yellow and blue mixed together make like a green color. Again, if we go with this black to this alizarin crimson or red, we mix them together, we get something that's kind of approaching like a violet, like a purplish color. Same thing here. If we go over here, this yellow ochre and alizarin crimson, and we start to mix them up. Now, again, it's like you can't just mix things 50-50 and expect it to be what you're going for, right? There's certain strengths to the tinting power of the colors that you're using. Again, it's like a highly technical point that you probably just have to get familiar with by doing it, right? Kind of digging in. I mean, people can, again, same thing. We can talk about all this stuff all the time, but until you really, dig in and start doing it, you're not going to have as much of a familiarity with it, especially if it's on the fly. So on and so forth. Okay, so and then you can start to blend these together however you want. You can, of course, like make even more kind of interesting, kind of neutral, more neutralizations if you like. I don't know, whatever. So on and so forth. But but you see where I'm getting at. Like you can have all of these colors that kind of stand in, right? They're not intense, but they do create like a range of different hues. And then of course, like we're talking about, like you can saturate them differently. I have a few paintings here. Let me see if I can share some of these. All right. Hopefully this shares. All right. So here's like a portrait I did, and again, this was in that palette, and I think you can see, there's a lot of color. It's kind of a dark picture. I do apologize, but that's the thought, right? I was able to sort of achieve some areas that feel much more intense, right? Like kind of warmth in the lip area, right? Again, there's kind of like there's some cool gray over here. It's like kind of that violet influence that was used with that palette I just showed you. And then I one more. Yeah, this one. All right. So a little bit more like in-depth painting. But again, it's the same palette. It's that same exact palette. And I think that when you're talking about like the intensity of the colors, for instance, over here, like in the shoulder, it looks intense through comparison, right? Through comparison of like this gray, neutral brick wall, right? Versus the, how much of that intense red that I could use, how intense could I get it? So there's a lot of simultaneous contrast going on. There's a lot of, value structure. but what's on top of it is sort of neutralizing or intensifying the hues, so that way you end up with, overall like some just some description of the color, as it were. um, so that was just, that is an exercise. Using that palette has been an exercise that I think helped me understand color a lot more. um, it helped me understand color, just a lot more in depth, right? A lot more deeply. And so, yeah, no, that was that's a thing. That's a thing that I thought was useful
God damn,
for
James, you're
me.
such
So,
fucking. You're a hell of a painter, dude. Holy fucking shit.
no, thank you.
Sorry for
No,
that
I'm
language.
just trying to demonstrate, though, like, just these ideas about, like, you can do some exercises and they may like equate to something that you really are passionate about, for instance. But I have a colleague, and he does that all. He mixes black and yellow all the time and makes this really beautiful olive green color. It's and it's kind of like it's like a signature of his, really. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, anybody can do it, but he just does it. Like, I don't even think he has another green. I think that's what he does. That's his go-to green, and it looks amazing. Hey, Spirit has joined us. Spirit, how are you
Yeah.
doing?
What's up, guys? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. I'm doing great. I just I was like, oh goodness, my guys are on. And then I was like, color theory. I was like, oh gosh, it's my favorite. So I just chimed in. I'll definitely go back and watch the video if you got some nuggets in it. I heard somebody say that was amazing, and I can't wait to go watch that. So.
Oh, dude, James' paintings. Holy shit, dude.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, his paintings are just unreal.
I'm excited.
So I think since we're all here, we should talk about tattoos and stuff. Right? We should talk about tattoos. We should talk about how does understanding some of these things like impact how you're going to go about doing your work. Because I think that, like, the hue, intensity, the value, right? All of that stuff plays a role. And then the other part of it too is, like, you have to have a knowledge about how this ink is gonna, like, age. Like, how is it gonna settle? Like, what ink is, like, the most intense? Sometimes you can kind of, there's definitely inks that I use that are um like, I don't want it to be as solid black. I might want it just a slightly lighter black that's not like just a gray, for instance. Or I might want to use like some really neutral grays and start to pack that stuff in. Spirit, I saw a tattoo that you did recently. It was an owl. It was brilliant, and then it had, like, it was like all solid, like gray tones and stuff. We talk about that a little bit.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a Neotrad owl. And I've really been trying to work on my saturation and, like, leaving no skin. And just using just the idea of, like, using actual opaques has been a real game changer for me, because I could just use my lightest gray to kind of go in to fill the gaps where I would normally just have skin. And then one of the things that I've learned recently is that if you take a cup of, like, just like a ink cap and put just like a few drops of white and then the rest water, and then at the very end of the tattoo, you take your mag and you just all over the entire tattoo. If it's a black and gray tattoo, just all over the entire tattoo. What it does is it's almost like a smudge tool. It's it just kind of like fills in some gaps that you kind of didn't know were there. It just kind of brings things together, I find. Yeah. And just and just like what Kyle said, one time, is just, you see a little holiday and you just kind of spend time, just working on those little. And here's the thing, James, I did that whole thing with a 9 mag. You know what I'm saying? And it was the whole arm. And whereas before I would use larger needles but I find that using the smaller needles is actually helping me do, more packing and color, more of the saturation. So yeah.
No, thanks for that insight. I actually had never heard that. I've definitely seen people like add a little bit of white to their black and gray mix, and it like does seem to unify it a bit. I'm kind of like I do a drop, black and gray. I just do drops in the cap. Like I keep it consistent so I can go back later. Same person. I used to work with a guy. He was real meticulous, and he would like write down all the recipes that he would make to make specific colors. I really admired it. It just that's not how I work. But I think that can be really amazing. But I do like the consistency. I don't have a gray wash that I use, so I can't recommend any particular ones. But I definitely use just sort of like specific amount of drops, and then I try to keep that going on.
I do I'll do I'll have a cap full of black, and then I'll have 20% of that, and then 50% of that, and then 50% of that, and then until it's just like one. Well, I have like four. I'll do like 3 caps or 4 at the most, and then the last cap has like 2 drops of black, and then the rest, either water or white.
Mm-hmm. I just been using just like Dynamics pre-made gray wash set.
Nice.
I guess I'm just lazy. I don't want to fucking do the drop system. I'm just lazy. So
that
I've just
dynamic,
been using
yeah,
that.
those gray sets are really nice.
Yeah. They've been doing their job. So I need to see more Hildberg for sure. But yeah, I'm so interested in that white with the distilled or like witch hazel, whatever the hell you want to put in it, type of thing, and just kind of like smoothing stuff out. I'm so interested in that. I want to try that out like right now.
Yeah. Try it out. Just like maybe like 2 to 3 drops of white, and make sure it's mixed well, and just go over the piece.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
So I think something else that I would mention is this idea about like having it all the way saturated with ink all the time. And I think that like can be amazing looking, but there's also times where you can use the skin, where the skin can do some of the talking, and you let some of this, you blend it into the skin, you let skin show, maybe even have you might even have a ratio, right, of like thirds, like 1/3 black, 1/3 color, 1/3 skin. You know what I mean? Like, what I mean? You end up like I think you can approach it that way too. But certainly like there are times when I have like a full saturation is beautiful, and it's I think it's the right approach, and so being able to do that I think is a technical accomplishment. You got to work on, you got to like refine your skills and your approach so you can do that without overworking, for instance. But something that I've gotten a lot of better results with too, just my so since we're talking like tips, it's this tightening up. So what I mean is like you block things in, right? You don't really get too worried about the little corners. You don't get too worried about like maybe you can't quite get all the way up to that line, for instance. It can get complicated. You have lots of blending and whatnot, but like go back at the end, right, with a smaller grouping of needles, and you tighten up all those edges, you tighten up the corners. Doing that, it just even if it only take it might take an extra 15 minutes, maybe an extra hour, I don't know, whatever it takes. It's like you might end up like with a much higher quality product. So that's the thing. I think it's similar to what you were saying, Spirit, about like sort of giving everything like sort of unifying, blending, add a little bit of that whitewash, it seems like, and then things come together a bit more. Making sure that you tighten up all the corners and stuff. I think it's just a real big part of it. It's so easy to get like, I'm so busy, I just got to finish this up and get on to the next thing. You can neglect, right? You can neglect some of those details. but it's a detail, right? You don't want to get, you don't want to get obsessed with it, like right in the get go. Like let things develop and then put on the details. Yeah, the tightening portion, really important. I think phase of the tattoo application.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. What do you do that? Like, do you set up another session, or do you
Sometimes
just yeah? Because I just find that like even the tightening can be very tedious, and maybe a second session would be good for something because you're just fresh. They're fresh. They're not ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
that's totally a good point. It just depends on the context. So if it's it's a really big tattoo, I think if it's a really big tattoo and they paid you well, you should you know should have them come back in and tighten that thing up. You know,
Mhm.
on you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's on you. Maybe that's like, hey, I just want to I want to let everything settle. Like we're done, but we're gonna take it to the next level. We're gonna actually go. We're gonna go in and make sure everything looks really polished.
And that was a promotional piece. Like I was literally like doing that on my HVAC guy because my AC is busted. Um, and so I was like, hey man, if you put some Freon in my AC, I'll give you a free tattoo. And he was like, let's do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I'm glad that you said this because I had a lot of fun doing that owl and tightening a tightening session would definitely because I just saw some areas that could have just needed. I'm trying to get rid of this glare. I saw some areas that just kind of like needed tightening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and the
Yeah.
devil's
It
in the
never
detail.
hurts. It never hurts to just give the client a couple hours or a couple months or whatever, have them come back in. And even if it's like an hour, even if it's 15 minutes, even if it's like 2 hours, just to like tighten it up and just to make sure that everything is solid and good to go. Like, put it on yourself. Like, you don't have to fucking charge for absolutely everything. I know, like, you don't want to give everything away for free, but like,
Yeah.
if it's something that, like, I personally, if I can make it to where the tattoo is going to be that much better if I just have them come in and they've already paid a good amount of money. Like, no, you're done paying. I'm going to bring you in. I'm going to make sure that this piece is 120%. Compared to just being like, well, we're at 100%, so whatever. I'll just let it be. Like, you've paid your money, we're done. Like, it's like taking care of the piece and the person more than your income, which I don't want to minimize your income because we all have families, we have lives to take care of and stuff like that. But like when it comes to like the artwork itself, just putting yourself out there just a little bit extra to do just that little bit more, just to make sure that your tattoo is that much better and your client's going to feel more taken care of. It's just like a win-win situation for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Customer
'Cause, like,
service. It's important. You're relating to these, like that's it. We got to take care of the people who like they think enough of us to have us do a tattoo on them. You know what I mean? It takes a level of respect. You know what I mean to get a tattoo from somebody. So, I think it's but that's reciprocal, right? Oh, Jason, it looks like we just lost you. It's great to have you. There you are. Hey, there you are, Jason. Great to see you.
yeah.
Looks like you had to bow out for a minute, but here you are. You're back. Um, we were just talking like some tips and tricks. There's one other thing that I wanted to share, um, but yeah, do you have anything that you want to like share with us? Something that you find has helped you grasp color theory, or maybe even like like we're kind of philosophizing about like the ethics of customer relations and how what I mean, like how it is that we're so like what's the best way to treat. We don't want to get taken advantage of, but there's a reciprocal exchange that we're all involved in here with this with our relation. What do you think, Jason?
Oh boy. um, there's any number of different things that you want to look at. So I heard Spirit mention his question about should you do that tightening at that point? Should you wait until it heals, get him back in? I always like to schedule a follow up just in case there's anything that needs to be tightened up. Maybe something didn't heal quite right. Maybe they had a problem area.
Mhm.
Maybe they didn't take care of it very well, even though we ask clients to follow our directions all the time. Sometimes they don't.
Mhm.
So I always like to get them back in for a follow up session, especially if it's something that I'm super stoked on, that I'm really pouring a lot of time, effort, and energy into. Get them back in, and in that follow up, maybe it's a couple bucks or just something to cover cost. But that's your quality assurance round, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
That first time you go through and you execute that tattoo, it may look great, but you want to make sure that it looks great forever. And you want to make
Mhm.
sure that everything is tightened up. All of your color fields are nice and blocked. Devin Cooley brings up the concept of bulletproofing. Andy Chambers does something very similar, where you find the shapes of individual colors and you just go right along the periphery with something small, round, just tighten everything up, make sure all those hard edges are nice and hard, all the soft edges are nice and soft. Maybe you can adjust a little bit of tonal value here and there just to make sure it's right. Really blast those whites, really saturate those blacks, really bump that contrast out there. But that I will always do after a second or after that first initial session is done. Much like James was talking about before, how you go through and you have this concept of blocking in, right? And then you refine. I always consider that second session the refinement. That's your detail session. That's when you go through, push your blacks, drop your whites, really make that super bright, tighten everything up so that all the color goes straight to the edge. Everything is nice and smooth and silky. To me, that's a completely separate session because I could spend hours
Mhm.
doing that with every single
Mhm.
tattoo that I do.
Mhm.
So, and if you've already worked on a piece for say 4 to 6 hours, they're not going to want to sit there for an additional 4 hours while you just tweak tiny little stuff. I mean,
Mhm.
not only that, but the skin's already open. It's all you're going to be doing is going back into spots that you don't necessarily have to touch at that point in time.
Mhm.
So I always separate that. Always. Um, Spirit, what you were talking about before about how you found that you were getting better saturation with smaller mags. Um, Many, 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 many moons ago, there was an artist named Brandon Bond who talked about that extensively
Mhm.
in two of his seminar videos that were out there called The Whole Enchilada. Um, he, for some reason, used to not be able to get fully saturated color, like true skin saturation. He was never able to achieve that with anything larger than I think it was like a 9 mag. Um, and which in the back of my mind, I'm like, really? Okay. I mean, hey, everyone's different, everyone to each their own. Um, but he was talking about how he once did an entire back piece using nothing but a 9 mag because he wanted it to be completely and totally solid and saturated.
Was it that dark shade?
And I mean, he was also one of those people that subscribed to the rule of thirds with black. So he would do a whole third of black, everything, whole third of black shading, and then he would have a third of color, and then he would try to sweep that out into lighter tones, whether he added white just to adjust certain values, or whether or not he left it skin tone, kind of dependent on the piece. But he was a huge advocate of when you think you have enough black in a tattoo, you actually need more black.
Hmm.
And
Mhm.
that's when you look at some of the work that he does, a lot of his color is very desaturated because you can tell he was dipping straight into his color from the black. So a lot of it's just very, very, very desaturated. A lot of it's on that, black and a color kind of spectrum. And so that automatically muted out a lot of his tones, which is awesome, because then he'll go back through with one pure solid color. He'll use that as his bright color, his main focal color, and boom, that color is going to jump out in front of everything else because all of the other colors in the tattoo are super muted. Um, it works really, really well if you use that methodology, because as my very, very, very good friend Bruno once told me, if all the colors are bright, none of the colors are bright.
Right.
So it's like, because if you have all of your colors on that same level of chroma, right, that same intensity, they're all very bright, very saturated, and they're all in that same just super vibrant area, then none of them are truly going to be that vibrant without any kind of muted tone for your eye to compare it to, right? Because your eye is constantly looking for comparison, right? Whether it's dark to light, warm to cool, muted versus pure, or high versus low chroma. Your eye is constantly looking for contrast everywhere. Uh, because of that fact, if you do not have muted tones and you're working with a lot of colors, if you do not have any muted tones in your piece, then your eye is not going to be able to differentiate between bright colors, and you're going to lose some of your visual impact. It's just something that was brought up a while back, and it's something I really dived into. James, I have to second your opinion, by the way. James Gurney, yes. I love his books. I have a couple of them. And they completely changed the way that I look at color. I mean, if you've got, say, a stucco wall and you're using mostly yellow ochres, mix in a little bit of lavender, create some shadows, right? Because you've got purple and yellow, right? Pretty much opposite sides of the color wheel. When you add those together, it's going to cool down certain areas. It's going to create that muted kind of tone, and it's going to give you a shadow without actually having to use black and desaturate that color. So,
Yeah, these
there's
are these are
James
great.
Gurney has a perfect example of that in one of his books, and I
Totally.
always look at it.
I wanted, since we've got since you're, if you're still here, right? Just wanted to share a couple of last little resources with you. And so this one, this is the Abbott color wheel. You can find this on Tattoo Smart. This is Russ Abbott's color wheel. It's coordinated with Eternal ink. So all of the hues, right, that Eternal offers. I mean, I don't know if they offer more than this, but it's a lot. There's, we're talking
He
about
also has different versions
lots and
for
lots of
different
colors.
color companies. So he's got one for Fusion. If you use Fusion, he's got some
Oh,
for a
does
couple
he?
of yeah.
Yeah. No, I didn't know that. I do know that there's this one. This is the one I have with is for Eternal. But yeah, but I think it's useful in terms of like for a color wheel, right? There are analog color wheels you can have. This one is digital. It's nice on the layers. There are all these different harmonies uh, that Russ has developed for us, right? So again, this is that split complement we were talking about it. Yeah. Right. So I can rotate this, and then what falls under the split here, right? That the colors in this smaller section, right? Those are going to be the key colors. They are really going to stand out in relationship to the split, right? The colors that are opposite and analogous on the color wheel, right? So the analogous colors on the color wheel versus like sort of a key color on the other side. And so again, it's pretty simple, but at the same time, this is a helpful little resource. And so again, you can find that on Tattoo Smart. We did a whole episode where we talked about this this color wheel. I think that was a couple of years ago now. But anyway, this is a very cool color wheel. And then the other thing that I wanted to share is, give me a moment here.
Hey, James,
Yo.
if I can on the color wheel kind of topic, if I can go through and share my screen for anyone out there that uses an iPad, there's a Procreate hack for just that exact thing. It doesn't sync up with your tattoo pigments, but there's a way to go through and use Procreate, figure out your primary, tertiary, secondary, and get different color schemes all right there already into Procreate.
Yeah, you can share your screen. Go for it.
Okay. Let's see.
If you
Actually,
change
no.
your input to the screen you want, and then here I can stop. If you
Let me
change the input
see
to the one you
if
want, I can maximize you, and then
yeah. So
here we go.
I'll just create a new document. Boom. Right there. So say we're drawing whatever piece we want, and we've got, nice big green. Well, okay. So now I want to know what the exact contrast is, but I don't have my color wheel handy. What do I do? Right? If you look down at in the middle on your color palette in Procreate, you'll see harmony, right? Right there. Now, what you can do in harmony, and I've got mine set up for split complementary, is you can adjust your value, your tonal value here on the slider. Up here in the upper left where you see split complementary, if you tap on that, you can actually switch it over to complementary, split complementary, analogous, triadic, tetradic, and you can go through and actually utilize that as opposed to, so that would be the triadic color scheme based off of this green. So if I wanted to use a blue, well, now I know I need this kind of orangey red and this green over here. If I wanted to go with more of a tetradic color scheme based on the color that you have selected already, this will give you the tetradic color scheme. So that'll give you the 4-color set. Split complementary will tell you exactly what complementary colors to use if you wanted to go with a split complementary color, or you can go with complementary colors, and then that will tell you exactly where on the magical color wheel.
Wow, that is amazing. So this is like the Abbott color wheel kind of right here almost.
Kind of.
Just without the eternal ink.
It's not going to go through and sync up with the actual tattoo colors that you're using. But what it will do is it will give you an idea. Say you're working on a color draft for someone and you've got this really wonderful, like mint green dragon that you're working on, right? But you want to know what to balance that out with. Well, first thing I would do, I'd cut my chroma down to about half, and then I'd come over here to the contrasting color.
Wow.
There's my color contrast right there.
That's crazy.
Right?
Oh,
so it simplifies a lot of the guessing when it comes down to, hey, what color should I use for this area? Well, let's take a look. Or say I wanted to do a nice colorful blend, I would go with the split complementary. Let's go back to here. So that would be split complementary. Drop this down. So I would want to use a dark pink. And I would want to use this kind of like burnt orange color. And those would give me the split complementary color tones to this nice mint green.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah. So just a little Procreate hack for everyone out there. If you ever get stuck in a rut and you use Procreate to draw, go through, try it out. It's called Color Harmony. It's built into Procreate. It's not any kind of an add-on. It's not anything different. It's literally there at your fingertips all the time. Feel free to use it all you want. It's how I make a lot of my color choices and decisions. So yeah, just something to play around and think about. Thanks,
you,
James.
Jason. That was really good, man. That was so good.
Yeah.
Spirit, what do you want to say? You had your hand raised. I just saw you.
Real quick question, James, Jason. Do you know anything about
yes,
using the CMYK color format as opposed to RGB and how it translates to skin? Is that a thing?
How much time do we have? Because we can go down this rabbit hole, man, but it's not a short answer.
Okay.
Essentially, anytime you're painting, anytime you're working with printmaking, anytime you're working with any kind of physical media, what we're using is a form of, for lack of a better term, almost like an additive color scheme, and that's what CMYK is. If I remember correctly,
It's
I
the
may have.
it's the opposite.
Is it? It's
Mhm.
subtractive. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a while since I took those printmaking classes that really broke all this down and the color theory courses. Thank you, James. But essentially, we're always working with that kind of a subtractive color scheme. Um, and so anytime we perceive light, we're perceiving it in RGB or red, blue, and yellow. That's the way our eyes perceive it. But when we're actually trying to create the colors in physical reality that are going to reflect back that light, that is going to be a lot more akin to working in a CMYK kind of color palette. Um, Not that that really matters, but that's kind of why your iPads are almost always set to RGB. Any kind of computer screen you're looking at is going to be in RGB, unless you've got one of those like super crazy 8K curved like screens at home. Those actually project in CMYK, but I have no idea how those work. Um, just about any computer screen, tablet screen, phone screen, anytime you're perceiving color is going to be in an RGB or a red, blue, yellow kind of color scheme. Anytime you create color on a physical media, you're going to be working with a more subtractive color scheme, which means that when you combine all the colors, you're not making anything brighter, you're making things darker or more muted. You're getting rid of color intensity. Um, when you're tattooing, if you think about it more in a CMYK kind of way, where if I take red, blue, and yellow and I add all those together, I'm not going to get a bright white. I'm going to get this muted color, right? When you start to think about things in more of that way, you can start to try to translate that to skin. Now, that's not to say that working with red, blue, and yellow isn't going to be beneficial. It's going to be very beneficial because you're going to learn how to create all these colors, and it makes breaking down your color schemes very, very easy. When you start to get into CMYK, it's a whole headache when you're dealing with a color wheel because you're not working with three primaries anymore. You're now working with four, and you're taking away intensity as you add in. So it's a complete and total flip of the brain. You literally have to take everything you thought you knew and twist it all the way around. I When I work with tattoos, when I work with paintings and stuff like that, my mind is still picturing red, green, blue color or red, blue, and yellow color scheme. That's the way my mind is thinking about it. But because I know that I'm mixing in more of a subtractive color scheme, I'm going to adjust my palette for that. So it it gets really tricky and confusing, and this is like a whole discussion.
Mhm.
We
Um,
actually talked about this exact thing in the beginning
yes,
of our of our stream today, but also just to kind of I think to bring some some relationship here, like the black, right, the key in terms of like CMYK, it's like that gives you tonal value because usually you're going to be printing on white paper, and so like you're going to have a certain level of saturation. Like you might have really intense cyan, the blue color, right? You might have really intense that, like really saturated, add a little black, it gets darker, hold back a little bit, you show more paper through it,
right.
right? The same thing could happen, if you're using, if you think about the skin as a medium as well, like you might like hold back on saturating and allow that to be like the lightest portion. I think, you know, like I think relying on too much like white ink to sort of pack into a tattoo, that might sometimes that can, you know, backfire. But certainly, you know, I think it's a real valuable question to think about, like how CMYK works, how, you know, RGB works. I agree with you, Jason. I do. I think about color theory in that simple, you know, red, yellow, blue, like that traditional way. But I think you don't get the full color wheel until you add the cyan,
Right.
magenta. You know, like you're not really going to get all that way to the, you know, to the really intense secondary colors without it. And I wanted to share one more resource with everybody in case you don't know this guy. Uh, Peter Donahue. He goes by I think he goes by Color Nerd or something like that on TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, do y'all know this guy?
Mm-hmm. Dude, some of the
Amazing.
stuff he posts is so cool.
Yeah, he is he's brilliant on, you know, on color theory. And and I think that was what I was really kind of referring to earlier. Is like this conversation is not settled, right? This is something. This continues, right? This goes on and on. And so as we are, you know, we're really thinking about like how do we apply some of these principles to the things that we're you know, that we're doing in our tattoos. You know, we're keeping an eye on, you know, what's happening in the world of art, as it were. Let me see if I can. But anyway, this is Peter Donahue's link tree, right? And so he has like I'm hoping this. Well, so you go in and then you end up, you know, he gives you access to you know, like all kinds of resources for free, which are very cool. But there's also, you know, there's free handouts and stuff, and then also there's like some really amazing like old books and stuff. So I would I just, you know, I've really like enjoyed, you know, sort of following his posts and then also like kind of looking at all the stuff that he is sharing. And so but there's all kinds of great resources out there. That's what's so amazing about the oh, so anyway, yes, Peter Donahue. Hopefully you can you know, hopefully you can find his you know, some of his content. And you know, just I think just hanging out with your colleagues and talking about this stuff is going to be so valuable for you, you know, because you never know, you might like get a little insight into something that uh, you otherwise wouldn't. So anyway, that's color theory. That's that's our stream for today. I hope that was inspiring, and I hope that it was something that, you know, again, I don't think we gave any. There really isn't any recipes, and there really wasn't any like, you know, like how to. It's more principles and concepts that are going to help give you the freedom to act, right, to choose. And again, you know, you might come up with a color harmony that you love, and other people don't. Nothing wrong with that, I don't think. So you got to be interested in the stuff you're interested in. So. Well, why don't we do a quick couple of sign offs and then we'll get on with the business of today. Jason, you got a drawing stream coming right up, and
I
just a
do.
hour and a half. It's going to be skill
I do.
building Mondays. Tell us about it and where can we find it?
So I'm the host of Skill Building Mondays here live on the Reinventing the Tattoo Network. My name is Jason Leeser. We actually will be kicking off in about an hour, little less than an hour and a half. We'll be starting Skill Building Monday. If anyone has any questions, anything they would like to discuss, by all means, let me know. You can drop me a message right here on Instagram, or you can tune in and just kind of see where things go. Drop a chat in the chat box, and we can discuss whatever you like. I may be having a special guest, a very good friend of mine named Lauren, dropping in today to talk about some stuff. So that should be pretty fun and interesting. We've got a number of different things to discuss. And if anyone out there wants to continue this discussion on color theory, I can talk about it for hours. Much like James, I went to school for art, and we're forced to take classes and this kind of stuff. So 15 weeks boiled down into like 10 minutes doesn't do anything justice. But the concepts are there. So thank you for that. Feel free to join me, jump in about an hour and a half right here on the Reinventing the Tattoo Network. Thank you, James.
Amazing. No, thank you, Jason. And again, I do think it's important that we just have these open conversations about these things. Nobody knows it all, right? And so again, like trying to explain it helps you understand what you don't know. Like as many times as I've talked about color theory, it's like, oh my God, what is color? How do you do it? And so I'm so glad you all could come and show me new things, and then also we could conversate. Kyle, where can we find you at? Oh, Kyle, could you share your rose? You were talking about a rose that you just finished up. I've been meaning to. I wanted to see that.
I want to see it healed before I start being like, oh, this is yada yada. Let me find a decent picture of it. It needs. I still think it needs a little bit more. It's a little red. It's a little bloody, but
let's check it out. I'm sure it's amazing.
All right, let me get back to this, and then.
Damn.
Gorgeous.
Very nice.
I want to see it healed. I want to see how the red settles. I want to see how everything settles.
That's gorgeous.
Thank you. Yeah. So there's just there's still like we talked about the quality control session.
Yep.
It needs that. It needs one more of those. So, and then it'll be done.
How long did it take?
I think this is like 8 or 9 hours.
Nice.
Well, I love the blush of warm color, right, out to this cooler violet. And so it's almost like you were able to go from orange to violet, or maybe magenta if you like.
Mm-hmm.
But the transition from a warm color to a cooler one, it doesn't have any of that sort of out of place gray or out of place neutral. It just is there's a nice movement in the color. So and then what I'm noticing too is on the leaves, they're much more neutral, right? You're not taken away from the intensity, right? You have these leaves are much more neutralized, sort of, looks like, minty green, tinted green, and then kind of a yellow ochre over here. Very cool, sort of application of color theory to your piece. Very nicely done.
Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for sharing.
Everyone's a learning process, so.
Yeah, but this is amazing. Oh, I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love it.
Thank
you. Thanks for sharing. All right, well, Kyle, where can we find you at? Where can we
if you want to get a hold of me, more than welcome to do so on Instagram. My handle is Olson_tattoos, OLSON. And if you can also reach me at trinityartcollective.com. More than happy to talk tattoos. And thank you everybody today. Seriously, super informative, super educational session. Super thankful for all of you guys. Jason, all your knowledge. James, all your knowledge. Spirit, all your guys' knowledge. I'm so thankful for it.
Thank you, Kyle. Seriously, no, thanks for sharing your tattoo. And really brilliant. Yeah, no, it's. I think that was the thing that I'm really where you're at. You're talking about what is it you're trying to achieve? That's going to determine your approach, right? And so again, there are exercises I believe that can be helpful, but you have to be decisive in terms of what it is that you're trying to accomplish. That's going to really inform with the way that you're going after it. So
Mhm.
really love this. Really love our discussion today.
Mhm.
Spirit, Spirit, you have a new tattoo shop.
Yeah, I got a new tattoo shop.
Hell
Yeah.
yeah.
It's called Tattoo Spirits. It's located in 3319 Platte Springs Road, West Columbia, South Carolina. I'm very, very excited about it, very happy about it. It's allowing me to just kind of have the type of experience with tattooing that I've really wanted to have, being very accessible to my clients, being very accessible to the artwork itself. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. And and another thing is, in this the economy is kind of sucking right now. So owning a shop is kind of saving my butt, because I'm able to just control tattoo prices at the moment. So that's been exciting. It is horrible. Let me also tell you, on the other end, it is horrifying because this is the greatest time in my life, and it is also the worst time in my life because a lot of things are happening in the background, a lot of really scary things. But they say higher levels, higher devils. You know what I'm saying? And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
I really appreciate you guys. Just having. Let me tell you something. Having good friends or just having like a group of people that you could just talk to is, I just can't tell you how important it is in the human experience. I was reading a book about happiness, and it says that if you have a group of friends that you could talk to, that's the equivalent of making 75,000 more dollars at your job. Um, it's just so valuable. So I second what Kyle says. I love you guys, and I appreciate you for having this, James. It's so valuable. Also, did y'all know that purple does not actually exist? Purple is not green in your head. It's like a space holder, right? We don't have any cones for purple.
Yeah. No, I heard that. Yeah, it's like it. I heard that, and I can't articulate it. Like the scientist who who I heard it from. But yeah, it's like it. We make it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, we make it. Well, that's we make up a lot of shit.
Right. Yeah.
We make up a lot of shit.
Yeah.
So
That's right.
I think that's again, it's so it's so mysterious. Our phenomenological experience, and that's why it's a process of building, and it's I think there's certainly it culminates in knowing, but also there's also going to be like like a a re sort of introduction to the process, right? The process is never ending, not in a spurious way. Again, there's a completion and it begins again. But yes, there's no purple.
Yeah.
Does not exist, But anyway, I love it. That's But thank you so much for coming, Spirit. It was really great to see you and great to hear about your success. Good luck with the shop. Break a leg, Kyle.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you
you
for
guys can
sharing
find
your
me at tattoosbyspirit.com. I didn't do the sign off.
Thank you. No, thank you. Tattoos
Tattoosbyspirit.com.
by Spirit. You're on social media. You gotta, give us that address again. What's one more time? We can come find your shop.
Yeah, tattoosbyspirit.com, tattoos by Spirit on TikTok, tattoos by Spirit on Instagram. I'm probably going to talk to Jason about how to do guest spots because I'd love to have you guys come down and rock out with me sometime. I just don't know how to do it, but yeah. All right, guys. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Spirit.
I'm already
Kyle,
looking
thank
at
you
flight
again for
prices.
sharing your tattoo. I think it's like, I think that's an accomplishment as well. So it's really just it's inspiring to see that.
Thank you.
Jason was able to share with us this, these tools on Procreate. Jason actually teaches a course on Procreate. It's very good. He's going to be teaching at Paradise. He's going to have a seminar. So if you're going to be at Paradise, you got to take Jason's seminar. And so I want to just thank everybody for coming. I want to thank everybody for joining us on the stream. Kyle, I'm hoping to see you later on at the subscribers group. We've got tattoo critiques tonight. Oh no. We're gonna be critiquing our tattoos.
Yay.
So
who's critiquing tonight?
I don't know if it's I guess it'll be a surprise. We'll see who comes and critiques us. Yeah. It might be Marcus Leonard,
Oh, good. Good.
he likes to give good critiques. So no, love all the critiques we get, because again, I
100%.
think it's so valuable. You may not
Oh
you
yeah.
may not be able to find it all the time.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah, 100%. Like critiques and are just they're so helpful. It's for me, it's like one of the best ways that I'm getting better. Is just to be like, hey, you random person that may know nothing about art, what the fuck? What do you think about this? You know, and it helps.
well, it's
And
amazing.
you know, so
Well, we're gonna do some sign-offs right now. This has been Drawing for Tattooers on Reinventing the Tattoo Network. We'd like to thank Tattoo Now. Tattoo Now is technology for tattooers. You can learn more by visiting tattoonow.com. Ask for Gabe. He'll get you all hooked up. And of course, we'd like to thank Guy Etchison for being the founder and inspiration behind the Reinventing the Tattoo community. Thanks, Guy. Appreciate having the space. And again, it's really awesome to watch your work. You know what I mean? It's continue to get better. That's pretty cool. You know, he's been tattooing a long time, and so it's I think it's pretty awesome to see people continuing to progress. So well, I'm James Wisdom. This has been Drawing for Tattooers. You can find me on the internet at Tattooing Wisdom. Thank you, everybody. Happy drawing, and we'll see you next stream. Thanks for everybody.